Hello, hello, welcome. I'm excited for you all to join me. I just opened up, so we'll let some people kind of filter in. I just posted the links to the recipes that I'm gonna talk about and also the link to the cashew paste that I made because I could not find it in the store anywhere. So it was super easy, and I just posted that on the Facebook and Instagram pages, so check those out so you can follow along. And we'll get started in just a minute or so. It's just about 5 o'clock, so give it a couple minutes. Anyways, I'm excited to have you join me. I'm Dr. Brittany Panico. I'm a board-certified rheumatologist. I treat adult patients in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And I am really excited to start this series called Eat Well, Feel Well. And I'm mostly doing it because I want to start feeling better myself. I struggle with, like most people, I feel tired, right? We work all day, we come home, take care of our families, and just things are busy. And so I think some of these recipes I just want to incorporate to help build fresh ingredients into my repertoire of things and hopefully get my kids to try some new flavors. I think that's important too for those of us who are cooking for a family, is maybe just introducing some new things to the people that we share meals with. So that's one of my goals. And then also I love talking to my patients about how to help our bodies, your body, feel better. And so I think this is really a great way to incorporate, again, just really small changes that we can start adding in over time, over the course of the year, to start adding in more fresh ingredients into our diet and really trying to be more aware of what we purchase when we go grocery shopping. Are we gravitating towards the prepackaged, pop in the microwave or the oven, already made meals, which are convenient and easy? Or are we gravitating towards fresh ingredients that we can manipulate to a flavor profile of our choosing so that we desire and start to crave more healthy food? So that is one of my goals as well, is that we kind of just establish a community that is looking forward to healthy, fresh ingredients. And so I'm going to cover a very broad range of flavors. If the recipes don't appease your taste preferences, then just skip on by them. I'll have something for you next week that might sound better. So check in frequently because I'll post updates, and this will be an ongoing series until I haven't decided how long I'll be doing it, but at least for the next month or so, we'll kind of add in some new things and see where it goes. So feel free to comment or invite friends. Even if you don't have an autoimmune condition, I'm here talking to all people. Everybody who wants to learn cooking tips or new recipes or just share, knowledge of healthy, fresh food. Everyone's welcome. So thanks for joining. I see a few people trickling in, so we'll go ahead and get started. And like I said, I did post on my Facebook the link to the recipes. I did take a picture of one of the recipes and then posted the actual link online, and then some of the tips that I use to adjust or tweak things if you can't find it in the grocery store. So again, I'm Dr. Brittany Panico, a rheumatologist in Arizona, and I got started on this nutrition journey in medical school. Part of it was related to a nutrition course that I had incorporated into my curriculum as an osteopathic physician. We had nutrition incorporated into medical school really before a lot of the MD schools started doing it. I think now it's pretty common to have some nutrition experience, but generally doctors don't really get a whole lot of diet or nutrition education. So I was really fortunate that I did get some of that. And then I attended a conference in Napa Valley with the Culinary Institute, and it was put on by Harvard, so it was really, really well done, called Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives. And it really introduced me at that time to more plant-based meals and easy cooking tips that I could incorporate, again, as a busy parent. So really fresh ingredients, tasting good, making, food taste good and craveable. And so that really just got me on sort of this train of like, let's talk about food. Let's talk about how food can nourish our bodies and really help us heal from the inside out. So whether or not you have an autoimmune disease, it's still really important that we take care of our bodies, because the connection between the food that we eat and the bacteria living inside of our gut creates this chemical cascade that fuels every cell in our body. And one of the most important connections that we're realizing now is the connection between our gut and our brain. A lot of the chemicals are shared directly between our intestines and our neurotransmitters, and that translates into how we feel, literally our mood, how we interpret pain, how we interpret energy levels, how we metabolize other things, other foods, how our sleep is affected. So it's really all intertwined together. And making that connection really helps establish the importance of what we put into our body. And the saying, we are what we eat, a lot of people laugh about that, but it's totally true. If we eat healthy, pure food at the heart of its most pure ingredient, as you would see it come out of the earth or harvested, that creates a much healthier environment in our gut than something that's chemically processed or something that's manipulated in a factory or by a machine. Because that process of chemical manipulation is what creates a more inflammatory response down the line within our gut. So when we talk about anti-inflammatory diet, what does that mean? It really just means that food or nutrition products that create inflammation within our body, microscopic amounts of inflammation over and over, and this is primarily in the form of free radicals or oxidative stress, that is primarily induced by chemical means, meaning artificial things. There are certain foods that can do that are natural, but it's mostly chemical induced. So anti-inflammatory is the exact opposite of that. It's utilizing real foods that we can purchase that are more fresh or frozen if it's in its pure form, that haven't been chemically manipulated. And our body knows what to do with that. Our body knows how to process those ingredients. And as we clean up our diet, so to speak, and take away more of the chemical induced ingredients and add more fresh or pure ingredients, we start to feel better, and our bacteria that live in our gut start to reorganize, and the healthier strains start to proliferate and the unhealthier strains start to die off. And we can actually feel that happening within our body. And it typically takes a couple weeks or so, I would say about 2 weeks, to really notice the difference. But if you have ever restructured your diet for any length of time, you will start to realize that you feel differently. You might feel less bloated, less achy, less gassy. Constipation and diarrhea are common symptoms that can neutralize. And you might notice a change in your skin or hair texture. You might notice less tiredness or that groggy, heavy feeling. And a lot of these symptoms that we just sort of think are not related to anything that we eat actually can be manipulated by our diet. So it's really fascinating. And I just want to bring little tidbits in each of these segments to kind of promote these things and these topics so that we understand them a little bit better. So today I just wanted to mainly focus on what an anti-inflammatory diet is. And there's lots of resources out there that kind of explain this in other terms and get into a little more scientific data, and I can provide some of those in the links as well. But I didn't want to get too scientific today. Mostly just introducing the terms anti-inflammatory and what we mean by that. So it's creating less free radical, less oxidative stress within our bodies. And the reason that those things, those chemical changes create inflammation is because our body has to repair that and fix those free radicals and neutralize that. So things like vitamins, you might hear of antioxidants, right? We think of antioxidants or phenols or certain chemical compounds found in food or supplements neutralize free radicals. And we want to get more of that. We want more of that sort of neutralization, healthy benefit from our food rather than food that creates inflammation or causes more of that oxidative free radical stress. So again, when those inflammation signals are upregulated, we feel symptoms. And a lot of times when patients will come in and have vague things that they're discussing, like chronic headaches can be related, or there's a link to, metabolic syndrome and high cholesterol, diabetes, all of those things. And a lot of that can be changed or adjusted by our diet. And so when we talk about inflammation, as a rheumatologist, my language is usually focused on what we visibly see, meaning joint swelling or a rash or some visible outward sign that something is happening. Inflammation, when we talk about it in general, in a broad sense though, are these microscopic injuries or insults to our system as a whole that just cause more stress to our body. And they can lead to changes in our DNA structure that then lead to other things like autoimmunity. They can lead to issues with fertility. They can lead to issues with weight management. They can lead to issues with mental health. So all of this is connected. And really focusing on, again, what we ingest as being a major role in that. And so here we are today to talk about a couple recipes that I found. We'll delve right into it. And I'll talk about why I picked those certain ingredients to highlight and what makes them anti-inflammatory. So my first book that I picked out, and I know this is coming up backwards, but I did post the link, is The Blue Zone's American Kitchen. And I just want to highlight really quickly that the things that I'll feature are going to be absolutely free to you. So the resources, I'll post the recipe, and if it's an online resource, I'll post the link. You don't have to go out and buy a cookbook. I get a lot of my resources from my library. I check them out and sort through which recipes look good to me and my tastes that I like. And so a lot of these things you don't have to spend money on. I'm not expecting anyone to go out and buy the cookbooks that I feature because I'll post everything. And then if it comes to ingredients that you don't recognize or things that sound like they're not very common, then I'll offer substitutes for things that are easily found in our grocery store. I am not here to talk about going organic or purchasing expensive products. I personally don't eat organic. I don't think it's necessary to be healthy and eat on the anti-inflammatory spectrum. Some people prefer it, but I don't necessarily have a preference. And just as a disclaimer, I am not specifically giving medical advice. So if you do have food allergies or food sensitivities, then please skip over the portions that you're sensitive to, and always seek medical advice if you do have an allergic reaction. So I just wanted to plug that in, that I'm not specifically giving doctoring advice. But anyways, the Blue Zone American Kitchen cookbook I found to be really, really fascinating. And I'll do another lecture, another post about what the blue zones are. But there are these little pockets, these little communities kind of scattered across the continents where people tend to have the highest life expectancy. So the highest percentage of centenarians, or people who live to 100 or close to 100. And these little pockets of communities are studied by a lot of different people. And a lot of what it comes down to is their diet. There's lifestyle modifications and other things that contribute to a culture being a blue zone, but one of the primary features that unifies all of the blue zones is the food that they eat. So this cookbook, I picked this particular book because it just came out this last year at the end of 2022. It's relatively new, and it highlights, again, pure ingredients that we can find in any part of the country. So yes, some of it is seasonal, but for the most part, they can be purchased any time of year. And the recipe that I chose, I actually made it last night for dinner for my husband and I. And it's, again, if you check out my post, it has the entire recipe. This is, again, backwards. But I picked the whole cauliflower with makini sauce. And it's in the Asian American section of the book, page 175. And it's a recipe from a restaurant in New Orleans that was actually nominated for a James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant in 2018. So this is a tried and true recipe. And it just really caught my eye because the picture looks comforting. It was, we're in winter, comfort food. And the cauliflower in the picture just really looked appetizing to me. So again, this is primarily Asian flavoring. The spices are found in Asian foods, and I'm not going to go through the entire recipe because you can read it on your own, but I do want to just highlight some of the ingredients and why I wanted to talk about this recipe in particular. So this can be a side dish. I made it as a side, but it can also be the main dish if you prefer. One of the tools that I love to reference and use often with my patients is called the Harvard Healthy Plate. And again, I'll post a link to this in the comments. But it's a great tool that restructures our food pyramid. And it uses vegetables as our main component rather than when we traditionally think of as meat as a main dish. So this follows the Harvard Healthy Plate diagram. And I use that a lot as reference as well in my own cooking. And so with this recipe, particularly cauliflower, I wanted to highlight cauliflower because I think it's a really easy vegetable to cook with. You don't really have to have a lot of skill to make cauliflower taste good. It can be boiled, it can be steamed, it can be roasted, really any method of cooking. This particular recipe steams it, you blanch it, and then put it in the oven to essentially roast it. So it combines a couple different techniques, which I think are really, it's just nice to have in your repertoire of skills, but you don't necessarily have to. I think you can get away with just roasting it as well. So cauliflower, again, in this recipe is the main feature. Cauliflower is a great source of vitamin C and vitamin K. If you are on a blood thinner like Coumadin or warfarin, I will just mention really quickly, if you do not have a lot of cauliflower in your normal diet and you all of a sudden eat a lot of cauliflower, there is a good amount of vitamin K, so you will have to be aware of that. So again, just to keep in mind, if you change your diet significantly and you're on certain medications, you may just want to be aware and have a discussion with your prescribing provider. So vitamin K, a lot of vitamin K in cauliflower. It's a really great source of fiber. If you've ever eaten a lot of cauliflower, you kind of probably realize that. Some people, when you start to, again, change your diet from something that you normally don't eat to then all of a sudden eating a big portion of it, you might sort of feel a little bit funky. Again, it takes about 2 weeks or so to really restructure the bacteria in your gut. And so eating one dish and not specifically feeling well from it is not the best indication of how that particular ingredient will make you feel in the long run. But just be mindful, if you don't feel very good after eating certain types of foods, it might just be that your body is transitioning or getting used to those ingredients. And so with cauliflower, I wouldn't necessarily eat a whole cauliflower all at once, but in portions, that's great. So it's a good source of fiber. It's a good source of folic acid. This is important for people on medications in particular, or women of reproductive age, folic acid is very important. Folic acid is important for anyone who's undergoing a process where they're either anemic or needs to rebuild blood cells. So folic acid is one of the main components to all cells in our body, particularly neurologic cells and blood cells. So if you have any of those ailments, this is a great source of folic acid. And it's very low on the glycemic index. I want to highlight that in particular because if you have prediabetes or are adiabetic, the glycemic index of food is important. And we don't really get a lot of education about that in particular unless you seek out that type of education. And so paying attention to the glycemic index of food just means that it's not something that will spike your blood sugar very high when you eat it. So being a diabetic, you want to eat foods that are low glycemic index so that your blood sugar doesn't spike up. And that helps decrease insulin, and it also helps decrease the storage of food and carbohydrates once you're digesting them. So low glycemic index foods are great for everyone, but they're particularly great for diabetics, pre-diabetics, anyone on the metabolic syndrome. So cauliflower is actually a very low glycemic index vegetable, and that's one of the reasons that I find it it's very versatile. Another reason that cauliflower is so great is because it's used often as a substitute for rice products. And we're seeing it now in things like pizza dough. It's used again as a rice, as a filler. So the next recipe that I'll feature, the curry, if you wanted to just use cauliflower, not in this recipe particularly, but as a rice or filler for a curry, it's a great substitute for that. Cauliflower is also really great. Again, it's versatile in the way that you cook it. So it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't take a lot of effort to make it taste good. So that's why I chose this recipe as the first one. So some things that I altered, again, just partially because of what I found at the grocery store, what I had at home. It calls for a dried red chili. I didn't have that, so I just used a serrano pepper that I found from the grocery store. You can really buy any kind of red chili pepper. It doesn't have to be dried. Ginger paste. I did not find ginger paste, so I grated up some ginger and sort of mushed it and made it into like very fine, sort of more liquidy. And I found that to be worked out just fine. There's also, it calls for tomato puree. I used crushed tomatoes, and just be mindful when you're buying canned products that you're using in a recipe that you're watching the sodium content or salt content. So it's really, really easy to get to ignore how much salt we're using in our cooking, and high salt is not anti-inflammatory. So you want to try to use the least amount of additive salt as possible when you're using combination ingredients. So for like a can of tomato puree, a lot of times you can use actually tomato paste and kind of just water it down to the consistency of more of a puree. There's very little sodium in that. So that's another modification that you can easily do with this recipe. And then cashew paste. I did just post, prior to going live, I posted the recipe that I used to make cashew paste. It was really, really simple, and I did it in half the amount of time that it talks about in the recipe, and I think it still came out fine. So I just bought some cashews, some dry roasted cashews, and put about a cup in some water, let them sit for maybe 45 minutes or so, and drained out most of the water, left a little bit, and I put it in a food processor and blended it up to the consistency that I felt like was kind of pasty, I suppose, and then just use that in the recipe. So again, totally modifiable. You do not have to buy anything fancy. And then the last thing that I will mention that I modified is the dried fenugreek leaves. This part, again, I did not find these in the store. I used ground fenugreek that was in the spice aisle. It can also be substituted with just a mixture of herbs. So when I went to the store and asked what I could use to substitute, I just found kind of one of those, shaker things of mixed herbs, and I think that would work just fine as well. So again, even though some of these ingredients sound sort of peculiar, they're all modifiable. So it was easy to modify those things and just make a few adjustments. And the benefit of trying recipes like this is that unless you've had it at a restaurant or you've had someone else make it, you don't necessarily know what it's supposed to taste like. So to me, the way I made it was how it's supposed to taste. And if you want to tweak certain things, if you want it a little bit more spicy, you can add more chili. If you want it more creamy, you could add more cashew paste. You can totally rearrange the ingredients in a way that suits how you want it to taste. So for me in particular, that's how I made it last night. And if you saw the picture in the post, I thought it turned out really good. I'm somebody who loves anything with a sauce. So I told my husband I would put this sauce on a lot of different items, and I think it's gonna be part of my routine of recipes. So I thought it was really great. And I have some left over. I'll probably have a little bit for dinner tonight too. All right, so that was the first one. And then the second recipe, I just printed this picture offline, but you can find it on the link that I posted. This is a coconut fish curry that I just happened to Google and find. I have no ties to any of these products. I'm not affiliated with any of them. So, again, they're just recipes that I came across and thought really highlighted ingredients that, again, were more on the anti-inflammatory spectrum. So for this recipe, I used the Instant Pot. I think that it worked out really well. It was really quick. You can also do a stovetop version. She posts both options as part of her printout for the recipe, so I thought that was nice. The other thing I really liked about this recipe in particular is that the author posts her own substitutions, so it was very easy for me to follow. If I didn't understand what something was, I clicked on the link she provided and it took me to things that she already came up with substitutions, so that was easy. And I'll kind of go through them again and talk about my substitutions. I used just like a cod, a white fish. I have a bunch of fish from a fishing trip that my husband went on, so forgive me, I don't particularly know what kind of fish it was, but it was just a white fish. With fish, just as I kind of plug gout in here really quick, so a lot of the recipes that I talk about, I want to be friendly to not only everyone, but particularly the kind of patients that I treat. So when we talk about things that provoke gout flares, fish tends to be on that list. However, white fish is less uric acid producing than things like shellfish or other high mercury containing fishes. So this, like a lean white fish in particular, shouldn't necessarily be a very big stimulant for a gout flare. But just be mindful too, if you have certain health conditions where certain foods tend to be triggers for you, like tomato, for example, or fish, then there are ways that you can modify that as well and do vegetarian options or other, again, kind of flavor substitutes. So just to plug about the fish, was just a lean white fish. I did have mustard seeds laying around, but I don't necessarily think that that's like actually necessary if you have to go look for them. They are kind of fun to cook with because they sort of sputter and pop, but I think like a ground mustard, or if you have one of those deli chunky mustards that have the seeds in them, that's probably fine too. You can modify it again to fit what you have at home. She posts curry leaves in this recipe. I had no idea what curry leaves were, so her substitute that she included was lime zest. that was really easy to do. So I just modified that. Instead of 10 to 12 curry leaves, I just sort of guessed on how much lime zest to use, and that seemed to work out just fine. Again, ginger paste, we talked about how I modified that earlier. Garlic paste, I think that is easily modified as well. You can mince garlic really, really fine or blend it up and sort of make it into a paste consistency. It doesn't have to be, I mean, it comes in a tube, but it doesn't have to be anything that you're going out searching for. And then in this recipe, she uses half a green pepper, bell pepper, and half of an orange bell pepper. I don't really like using half ingredients because then I have to use something left over for the other half. So I picked a red bell pepper. They tend to be a little bit larger than the other colors. You can buy the long ones, and that, to me, that worked. Also with substitutes, one thing that I will add is if you're gonna substitute an ingredient and have the opportunity to make it healthier or add a little bit of benefit, then pick that. So what I mean by that is green bell pepper versus orange bell pepper and red bell pepper. The brighter the color or the more vibrant the color, the more phenols and antioxidants the product will have. So red, purple, orange, they tend to have a lot more of those polyphenol antioxidant properties than things like green, white, neutral colors, earth tone colors. So again, that was just a little sort of substitute that I made. I used red bell pepper instead of the green and the orange. Coconut milk is pretty self-explanatory. You want to pick unsweetened because, again, we're thinking about less refined products. So unsweetened is just pure creamy coconut milk. A lot of people with dairy sensitivities can actually tolerate coconut milk fairly well. So if you are sensitive or trying to avoid dairy, try a little bit of coconut milk in some other kind of recipe or as an ingredient and sort of see how you react with it. It's not a dairy milk, so just keep that in mind. And then going through the spices that she lists, those were all pretty self-explanatory. The mint leaves, I did not have mint and I didn't purchase mint, so I think that she mentions that it's optional. I do think it's totally optional. And then, yeah, that kind of goes through the ingredients and the substitutions that I made. So I had a lot of fun with these. I made my dishes last night for dinner, and like I said, I have leftovers. I try to include things that are not really just like one meal items, because if you're gonna have all these ingredients to just make one meal, that's a little bit, kind of hard. So a lot of these have more than 2 or 3 servings that you can have as leftovers. Again, that helps cut down costs. Food right now everywhere is more expensive. So if we can kind of maximize our bang for our buck, then I think that's really helpful too. And then looking for ingredients that can easily be modified into different products. So for example, if you don't want to have the same meal twice in a row or 2 nights in a row, the fish curry you can easily put over regular rice, cauliflower rice. You can combine it with anything else, and it kind of thickens up overnight anyway. So, but you can combine it with noodles if that's your style. I mean, you can modify that with any ingredient. And then the cauliflower that I talked about earlier, again, can just be its own main dish. So you can have it with like green beans or some other sort of side, depending on how much you had left over. And again, just kind of modify that depending on your tastes. So again, I posted all the links and the recipes to these in a separate post, and I welcome any questions or comments. Please feel free to post them. I hope that this was helpful and just gave you a couple of ideas of new recipes to try for the new year. We all get out, start off the year strong with, I'm gonna eat healthy, I'm gonna do these things and have New Year's resolutions. And statistically, by the second week or so of the month, we kind of start to fizzle out on some of those resolutions. So I want to keep those those of you who are aiming to add healthier ingredients to your diet will keep going strong all year long. So these were just some ingredients that I felt like were helpful for the, again, anti-inflammatory components. I didn't talk much about the curry anti-inflammatory properties, so really quick, and then we'll kind of end this. Turmeric is what turns food, or traditionally curries, yellow. So there is turmeric in both of these recipes. Also be mindful if you're cooking with turmeric and you have anything that can be stained, it does stain. So it's definitely got a very definitive color. So try not to cook with it all over the place if you're trying to protect white surfaces. But turmeric, and particularly curcumin, that's the active ingredient that makes turmeric antioxidant or anti-inflammatory. And that ingredient is linked to things like, again, antioxidant, so decreasing oxidative stress, but it's particularly linked to features of arthritis. So turmeric has actually been studied in has scientific data to show that it can help patients with osteoarthritis, inflammatory arthritis as well, but the studies were all completed with osteoarthritis, or degenerative wear and tear arthritis. Patients noticed less pain, less stiffness with using turmeric as a supplement. And then there's more recent data to show that turmeric is really important for establishing neurochemical balance and the communication across neurons. And so it's being studied for its effects related to memory and Alzheimer's. So I found that really fascinating because, again, thinking about these blue zone communities and particular food items that they use, those communities in particular actually have lower rates of dementia. So again, could turmeric be responsible for that? I think it's part of the equation. So there is some role with neurochemical signaling in turmeric. And then also curcumin, it has been found to help repair the lining of our blood vessels called the endothelium. So endothelial damage or disruption of the lining of our blood vessels is one of the things that promotes stress on the heart blood vessels, so heart disease and vascular damage. So repairing that with curcumin, things like curcumin, can be really helpful. So all these little pieces of the puzzle, all these chemical signals that happen day in and day out in our body, all start to add up over time. And again, we're talking about microscopic levels of inflammation, but when we take time to correct that, or to try to introduce things into our body that helps decrease those levels or repair damage that's been made, then that's ultimately what leads to the anti-inflammatory spectrum of food products. So again, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next week. Again, invite friends, share this video. Please try the recipes if this flavor profile appeases you, and let me know what you think.